Hello and welcome, lovely people. I hope all is well with you. My name is Melissa, and without taking up too much of your time, I'd like to talk you through 4 signs of high self-awareness. Before we get to the heart of the video, I just want to say as well, a little quick disclaimer here. Everything that I'm discussing in my videos is based on my own personal reflections, life lessons, and my own experiences. If you are struggling with anything a little bit deeper or get triggered by anything that I'm discussing in these videos, then I strongly suggest speaking to a licensed therapist or psychologist. Okay, let's dive into it, shall we? I know who I am. You know who you are. We know who we are. As I unpacked in a previous video on different ways in which you can discover who you are as a person, uncover your identity, I also emphasize the importance of knowing yourself deeply and having a high sense of, and just also being self-aware. It's empowering to understand who you are because it not only boosts your confidence, but it enables you to live a life of purpose, and it also enables you to grow in different areas of your life. In an article for Psychology Today, which I've linked in the description, author and speaker Diana Robb, and I hope I'm saying her name correctly, apologies if I butchered that completely. Diana explains that self-awareness is the ability to possess the knowledge, understanding, and recognition of who you are. She continues to say that knowing yourself means being mindful of your disposition, your character, your motives, strengths, weaknesses, passions, and desires. And self-awareness allows us to identify what makes us unique in terms of our thoughts and our ideas. So in other words, when you are highly self-aware, you know your personality traits, virtues, values, flaws, etc., all the things that make up who you are as a person, basically. And in this video, I'm going to discuss how a high sense of self-awareness actually manifests itself. Because we always talk about knowing who you are very well, all that kind of stuff. But we don't really always interrogate what that actually looks like in practice. So I'm going to do that, and then also in turn tie it back to my first video on the importance of having a strong sense of self. So here are the 4 signs that I've identified that indicate that you have, or somebody else that you know, has a high sense of self-awareness. Number 1, you're able to admit to your mistakes and learn lessons from them. Making mistakes is inevitable. It's a normal part of the human experience. But the most important thing is that we actually learn lessons from those mistakes. Some people are a little bit better at the learning part of things than other people are. But if you are highly self-aware in particular, you are able to hold yourself accountable when you fumble. And you don't make excuses for mistakes that you have made, especially if it's something that is entirely your fault. And you avoid placing blame on other people for those types of mistakes. And, granted, it's not an easy thing to do, to be able to admit to something that you've done wrong or to face up to something that, when you made a mistake, also depending on the type of mistake that you've made. It requires acknowledging your shortcomings and accepting responsibility for your actions in a way that may not always be very comfortable, because it essentially involves stepping outside of your comfort zone into your growth zone. So when you are highly self-aware, you're not limited by your mistakes. Instead, you're capable of actually reflecting on your experiences in a way that is constructive, looking at what you did wrong and identifying areas of growth that will enable you to be better than you were yesterday. Number 2, you understand your emotions, can communicate them, and are able to process them in a healthy manner. Self-aware people have the ability to develop high emotional intelligence, which is essentially the ability to understand, recognize, and manage your own emotions as well as the emotions of other people. This is also linked to being able to regulate your emotions in a healthy manner. So listen, I'm no psychologist, so I'm not going to get into all the technicalities and technical terms around this, so please bear with me. But based on my own experience, all of this being able to develop high emotional intelligence stems first from having high self-awareness. When you can identify and name your emotions accurately, you start to be able to notice what it is that triggers you and how you typically respond. This also helps you to gain insight into your patterns and your reactions, which makes it much easier for you then to respond to a situation or to somebody else or a conflict with intention rather than just being reactive. When you are self-aware, you're also able to express yourself clearly. understand why you feel a certain way, and you're able to also communicate that to other people as well as your needs around those particular feelings and emotions. And this emotional clarity then manifests itself in you having stronger, more empathetic, and closer relationships with other people, where you're able to regulate your own emotions better, but you're also better able to connect with other people. This is something that I continually have to grapple with and continually have to learn. I come from a family that tends to avoid a lot of confrontation, avoid speaking about emotions, doesn't really care for outward expressions of emotions unless it's just contentment. And so things are often left unsaid, things often fester, and then things are also just swept under the rug most of the time. So conflicts don't really get to be resolved in a way that both parties feel seen and feel happy and heard. There's lots of kind of like dancing around different issues. It's been a journey to unlearn all of these behaviors, because personally, this is not really what I want for my life. And my decision to work on my own emotional intelligence and ability to express my emotions properly has stemmed from wanting to be more open, wanting to have relationships where I do feel more connected to people, wanting to have these deeper connections with not only just romantic partners, but also with my friends as well. I've been actively trying to, through introspection, through therapy, through doing a lot more reading on these particular topics, to better enhance my own sense of self-awareness and in turn to also improve my emotional intelligence. I'm really wanting to get a lot better at, and I feel like I have gotten quite far, but still have a lot to learn in terms of sitting with my emotions, learning how to process them in a healthy manner, learning how to also express them, most importantly, to somebody else when there is a conflict situation, rather than to just run away from them and not try to address what is happening with me if I feel hurt or I feel slighted or whatever else it is. Number 3, you're able to take criticism without being defensive. Being open to criticism is a strong indicator of having a high sense of self-awareness. Self-aware people, when faced with criticism, will not just react with defensiveness or shut down, but instead they will sit, reflect, take a moment and ask themselves the question, is there something that I can learn from this? And that is not to say that every bit of criticism that you receive is valid. Part of being self-aware is also knowing and understanding how to distinguish between what is constructive criticism and what is simply just noise. Self-aware people understand that receiving feedback, although it's not the easiest thing to take all the time, is an opportunity for you to learn and for you to grow. This requires having a certain level of humility, a willingness to also listen and understand, and the ability to separate your sense of self-worth from what is actually being given to you as feedback. And that's a very, very important aspect of it as well. You don't need to feel like all of this hinges on your entire self-worth or who you are as a person hinges on you receiving this feedback that you maybe made a mistake or maybe you hurt someone's feelings or offended somebody, but rather that you're looking at it as an opportunity to learn and to grow and being able to see that this is something that could help you in that area. I'm not sure if it's something that has come with, I think it's probably also has come from age, but also I think also actively working on my people-pleasing tendencies. Criticism doesn't really rattle me as much as it used to. Of course, there are certain times when I sit with certain things and you dwell on certain things, but there was a time in my life when I used to really, really dwell on negative feedback for days and just ruminate, especially depending on the particular source that it comes from. But again, I'm not going to get into that. That's a story for another day. But what I have learned in all of those experiences and continue to learn all the time, because, healing and growth it's a lifelong journey and continues throughout your life, is that it's important to treat constructive criticism as an opportunity to learn and to grow. Also, being on the Bachelor South Africa really taught me a lot about taking constructive feedback and criticism. It was quite an experience, and more on that later, but it really taught me a lot, especially when it comes to critique. When you're on TV, people will judge you for everything, right? Everything that you say and do is picked apart. Like, people will laugh at things that you've said or things you haven't said correctly, or the way that you say things, the way that you laugh. I mean, someone literally criticized my laugh. But even though I was getting a lot of critique and criticism, as one does when you participate in a reality TV show, I also received a lot of support, and I leaned on that quite heavily. I have, friends and family who watched the show and saw the experience and said to me that that is exactly who we know you to be as a person. And because they know me so well, I stuck with their critiques of, didn't stick with, but just learned, like really took more on board what they had to say about the show, what their opinion on things was, as opposed to the people who just did not know who I was at all and just felt the need just to say just horrible things. There were some really harsh comments and some really mean-spirited comments, not just to myself, but to also a lot of the other girls on the show, and some in particular that hurt me because I'm friends with these women as well. But I also learned to laugh a lot of it off. People will have their opinions, but they don't know you as well. And their opinions don't define who I am as a person. And that's why it's also again important, I emphasize, to understand, have a high sense of self-awareness, because it enables you to be able to distinguish, what is just background noise you should just not even take into account, and constructive feedback that actually can help you improve in your life. I'm saying all of this because the central take-home point is that criticism is and can be an opportunity for you to grow if it is constructive. And learning how to tell the difference is crucial, as well as indicative of high self-awareness. Lastly, number 4, you embrace and accept all of who you are. People with high self-awareness don't just accept the polished, curated, socially acceptable version of themselves. They embrace all of who they are. That includes not only their strengths and their talents and virtues, but also their flaws, their contradictions, their more awkward parts, the parts of themselves that they're still working on and still working through. Instead of denying or hiding the not so favorable parts of themselves, they acknowledge them with honesty, not coming from a place of self-hatred or ego, but rather from a place of just wanting to get some clarity, just understanding who they are as a person. High self-awareness looks like knowing the areas in which you shine and knowing the areas in which you don't, without spiraling into shame or pretending to be something that you're not. You're just comfortable and content with you as you are. Of course, maybe you do have areas that you want to improve in, but overall, you're happy with who you are as a person. Also, when you are a highly self-aware person, you also are able to laugh at yourself and poke fun at yourself for things areas that you fall short in, and you have a strong sense of who you are in your entirety, and no one can take that away from you. And so you're able to poke fun at that, but you're also able to give yourself some grace when you fall short, and learn from those mistakes. You're also able to cheer yourself up and cheer yourself on when nobody else will as well. And that kind of self-acceptance is such a powerful thing. For me, getting to that comfort part has always been an ongoing lesson. I've always had interests and tastes that I think have been considered a bit strange, don't really line up with this version or this idea that people have of me based on my race, my gender, my upbringing. There's a very specific version of me that people seem to think that I fit into, and I've always, in my own quiet way, like kind of deviated from that and done a lot of things that people have not expected from me. And for a long time, I just generally also, was doing things that were a little bit like different in many respects. Without kind of being like very loud about it, I was always just sort of very subtly kind of in my own way, maybe like rebelling against like what I thought was like the right way to do certain things. And it took me quite a bit of time to realize that marching to the beat of your own drum isn't just about being rebellious for rebellion's sake. It can be quite a strength, to be secure enough in yourself and to be aware enough of yourself of who you are, and to accept that even if it doesn't really fit what everybody else is saying that you should fit into. But essentially what I'm also trying to get to here is that once I really started to embrace my quirks and the other parts of myself that don't quite like fit in with what is deemed socially acceptable or deemed the right way for me to be doing things, I started to really find my people. Not only was I getting comfortable in my skin and growing in my own self-confidence and growing into myself, but I also got to connect with people in those particular niche areas and got to find my people essentially, which has been such a beautiful and rewarding and wonderful experience. So to wrap all of this up, becoming more self-aware means that you can better regulate your emotions. It means that you can stay true to your belief system. You can align your actions with your values. And while you're facing your flaws head on and acknowledging your weaknesses, acknowledging areas which you fall short, it it can be very intimidating, and it can be very daunting and a bit of a scary thing to sometimes confront your shortcomings. This process ultimately enables you to grow in your confidence and foster a deeper sense of self-love, because it's coming from a place of true honesty with the self. And the good news is that self-awareness is something that we all can develop, but we all can get better at. And there are definitely blind spots that all of us have, but there are certainly ways that we can all improve our self-awareness, which can enable us to then become a lot more confident and become a lot more loving and kind to ourselves. If you found this video to be in any way enjoyable, informative, educational, or inspiring, then please do give it a thumbs up. And if you are so inclined, please also leave a comment, because I'd really love to know what you think about this particular topic. Do you feel like you have a high sense of self-awareness? Do you think that most people generally know themselves well enough, or do you think it takes quite a bit of time for us to get there? What other signs do you think that I missed that also indicate that someone has a high sense of knowing who they are? I would love to know what you think about that. But that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.